Hi, so today in this video I'm going to finally get into the 6 books that I like to read every year, and I'm going to go through these in the order that I have read these in over the years, and I'm going to show you a few of my favorite editions that I own. So my first book that I'm going to talk about is a book that's very important to me. I mean, all of these are really important to me for some reason, but this is a book that I read when I was really young and still in high school, and that book is The Vampire Lestat by Anne Rice. And this book was just a catalyst for me for getting into vampire literature and just becoming interested in vampires in general. I came across Anne Rice's books after I went to see the movie Queen of the Damned when it came out. And just to touch on that movie quickly, that is a movie that is a bit controversial for Anne Rice fans because it is incredibly different from the book itself. I personally just like to think of it as a movie that is completely outside of the universe because it is just so different, but I love that movie so much. It's just very nostalgic for me. I love the soundtrack. I just love the whole vibe of the film. It's got that early 2000s aesthetic. I watched Interview with the Vampire after I saw that with Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt, and I read that book, and then I read The Vampire Lestat. So this is the second book in the Vampire Chronicles. There's about 13, I think, just off the top of my head. So Anne Rice did complete these before she passed away. Even though I love this book and I've read it countless times, I didn't finish reading all of the Vampire Chronicles till about 2 years ago, which is pretty weird. The reason being that I was just overwhelmed by how many there are. I generally don't really like series, and I'd heard so many times from other fans that the quality of the books, whether it's Anne's writing or her stories, just kind of declined over the years. And people didn't really like how the story shifted in the book. But having read all those now, I do regret not reading them earlier. But at the same time, I think if I had read all of those books when I was really young, I probably wouldn't have been able to understand everything to the level that I do now. And honestly, I loved all the Vampire Chronicles. There were, of course, some things that changed that I didn't like, but I think Anne's writing was consistent throughout all of them. And some of the older books have actually become my favorites. Like, for example, Blackwood Farm. I really love that book and I want to read that one again soon, and I think that's like 7 or 8 books into the series. I just love all of her vampires and her characters so much, especially Lestat, who is one of my favorite vampires ever. So yeah, I did read this before Dracula, and as I mentioned, Anne Rice was the one who got me into vampires in general, so I'm super grateful to her books for just opening up this whole entire world for me, especially at such a young age. But anyway, obviously book 1 is Interview with the Vampire, and that's from Louis' perspective. And then we move on to book 2, The Vampire Lestat, which then shifts to Lestat's perspective, and the rest of the books really are, majority of them are from Lestat's point of view. I really love this book because it is just about the life of Lestat. He sets out to do pretty much what Louis did and tell his story. So starting off with him being a young man, a human in the 18th century in France, and then how he becomes a vampire and how he moves through the 19th and then the 20th century. I just love the story of this. I think for me, out of all of Anne Rice's books that I've read, this is the peak of her writing. It's just so beautifully written. And if you are a fan of the Interview with the Vampire series, which the 3rd season will be coming out next year, I think they're starting to film that now, this is the book that it will pretty much be based on, and probably parts of Queen of the Damned, which is the 3rd book, which I also really love. And this edition that I've got here is my original one, which I've had for years and years and years, and you can see how incredibly worn it is because I've just read it time and time again. The pages have gone so yellow, but it's still intact, barely. It's just sentimental to me because it's my paperback that I've had for so long. A few years ago, I did start collecting all the hardcovers of Anne Rice's books, and I've pretty much got all of the Vampire Chronicles now in some kind of hardcover format, except for maybe the last 2 books, which I haven't gotten yet. But I bought this last year. I think I got this one. It took me a while to source a hardback of this book because there are some out there, but they are pretty expensive. So I was trying to find one in my price range, which is why I ended up getting one that is a little bit damaged. There is some peeling and some rips on the dust jacket. I don't mind that it's a little bit used because I love used books anyway, but I really love the cover of this. But actually I store this and most of my books without the slipcases on. I'd like to store them separately, especially for ones like this that are quite damaged. This is the front of the hardcover though. I love these hardcovers of Anne Rice's Vampire Chronicles. They're all quite similar. It is the only one that is white. The rest of them are black and gold. If you're a fan of Anne Rice though and you've read all the Vampire Chronicles, let me know which one your favorite one is. I might do a video later on going through all of those because I meant to do it last year and I just never got around to it, but I would like to read all of them again someday. But moving on to my second book, I've already kind of given this one away. Of course, it's Dracula by Bram Stoker, which you'll know by now, if you couldn't already tell, is a very important book to me and my favorite book ever. I read this after I read The Vampire Stat in my teens also, and I've got a few editions which I'll show you just to talk about why I love this book so much, because I get asked all the time, why am I so obsessed with Dracula? Mainly because of the history and the mystery that surrounds this entire book, but also we have to talk about Vlad III or Vlad the Impaler, who Bram Stoker allegedly based his vampire on, but at the same time it's not that simple because he didn't explicitly say that these two are the same person, and I've talked to people who believe both sides. Something else that really fascinates me about the mystery surrounding Dracula, this one, Powers of Darkness, which is a lost Icelandic version, and it is so different from the original Dracula. It's just really fascinating, and it makes me wonder what other translations are out there and why did the story change so much. So there's just a lot of mystery, and that extends to Vlad the Impaler as well, which I won't go into, but I'll go through some of my favorite editions now. So this one is the Penguin cloth-bound edition. I do have quite a few of these which I love, but as I've mentioned, they are a little rough to hold, so not my favorite one to read. This next one I picked up at a secondhand store. I just really love the cover on this because it's one of my favorite paintings, which is The Nightmare by Henry Fuseli. But my favorite one that I own is definitely this edition, and the reason why I love this one so much is because it's a replica of the first edition of Dracula, which had the yellow cover, and I probably would never be able to afford a first edition of Dracula, and they're very rare. This is probably the closest I'm ever going to get to it. I just really love this edition, which I found in a secondhand store, which is such an amazing find, and I just really love the gold and black spine and those details. Most people probably think that I have like 20 editions of Dracula, and I've actually gotten comments on my bookshelf where people are like, wow, you've got so many editions of Dracula, but it's just I have a lot of books related to Dracula. The last one I'm going to show you is this illustrated edition. It is abridged, but I came across this one secondhand, and I just thought it was so unique with this picture on the front, the illustrations inside, which I'll show you. But of course, there are some editions of Dracula out there that I do have my eye on that I would like to get. So if I do end up getting any of those, I'll share those with you. The next book I'm going to show you is related to Dracula, of course, but it's not so much about him and more about these group of characters. The book is The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova. It's a book that I've talked about a lot because I think it's really underrated and I think it's just incredible. It's got some amazing dark academia vibes and some gothic elements as well. But I also find it really cozy, and I love to read this book and basically all of these during autumn and winter because that's my favorite time of year to read and where I'll be at home, just being cozy with a good book. But this book is about a young girl, an unnamed narrator, an ancient book related to Dracula, and then she goes on this journey to find out what it's about. But at the same time, the book also jumps back into the past to her father and when he actually found this book and the journey he's going on also to discover what that is. It's just very mysterious, and I think it's just a really great read if you are looking for something that is related to Dracula, but also, has some mystery and some really great dark academia elements. I actually have 3 copies of this book. I couldn't find the other one because I've kind of stored it away, but this is just the standard red and black edition. But then I've also got a very special first edition, which I bought from a secondhand bookstore a few years years ago. I love this book so much, and I never thought I'd come across a first edition, especially here. For some reason, I never thought that would happen. So I'm still kind of shocked to this day that I ended up finding this. So this is what it looks like. And again, it's one that I will store without the dust jacket on because I love the red spine so much with the gold details, and then the black front is really nice. So if you've read it and you also like it, let me know. But speaking of dark academia books, this is a book that I consider to be the epitome of dark academia, and you probably already know which one I'm talking about if you are familiar with dark academia books. I'm talking about The Secret History, of course, by Donna Tartt, which is just a very important book to me. I read this one maybe 4 or 5 years ago now, and it was actually the book that made me start my Instagram account, and it made me want to start sharing the books that I've read in my reviews, but also want to connect with other people. So The Secret History, if you're not familiar, is about a character named Richard who gets accepted into this elite boarding school in New England, and he joins this very exclusive class with just a handful of other students, and they are taught by a very eccentric professor, ancient Greek, and they also study the classics. I think this book is so interesting to me because on the surface level, it seems to be just a book about this group of students who are studying ancient Greek. But Donna Tartt is so brilliant, and it's actually so layered beneath that. And I think that because of that, different readers will have different experiences depending on your perception, what resonates with you, and how you relate to these characters. Because I know a lot of people have read this and they just see these characters as horrible, snobby rich kids, but I feel like there's just so much more to the book than that, and there's just so much meaning. And the way that Donna Tartt talks about the classics is just really incredible, and you can tell she's really passionate because she studied them herself. So that's something that I really love about this book as somebody who is interested in that. But just the story in general and the way it's written is just beautiful. There are some quotes in this book that are just so stunning, and I really love everything Donna Tartt's written. She's only written 3 books, the other 2 being The Goldfinch and The Little Friend. Lots of other people wish she would write more books, but the 3 that she's written are really incredible, and this one obviously is my favorite. It was the book that got me into Greek classics and mythology, and I'll talk about that a bit more. But this is just the standard edition, which you probably have seen around. And then I've got the 30th anniversary edition, which came out a few years ago, which is a very similar cover, but obviously it's a bit bigger in a hardback, and it's got this lovely spine with the ribbon bookmark. And then the inside is really nice because it looks like some of the old hardback books you can get. And I do also have a bit of a special edition. This one I got a few years ago. This cover I had never seen before. This edition came out in 1992, so that's the same year when The Secret History was released. This is not a first edition. I just really love the cover of this, and it's my favorite one that I own. It just has some really beautiful details, and it's so different from the other 2. I know that there is a first edition with this cover because a few years ago at a secondhand bookstore, they had a first edition hardback of this with this exact same cover, which I'm still kicking about myself for not buying. But anyway, yeah, this is a favorite one that I own. If you've read The Secret History and you liked it or you didn't, let me know why. So my next book I talked about a few videos ago, and it is related to The Secret History because the reason that I read it was because of that book, and that book is Homer's Odyssey. So I read this book after The Secret History because obviously in that book they are talking about ancient Greece and they're talking about the classics a lot, and I wanted to read a lot of the books that they had referenced. I will say that after reading all of these things and then going back to The Secret History, I definitely appreciate that book a lot more, and I understand a lot more of the references. I did buy a copy of the Odyssey years and years and years ago, and I just had it sitting on my shelf for so long because I was really intimidated to read it. But then I just felt like it was finally time to pick it up, and I'm really glad that I did. This is the Penguin Clothbound edition, which is translated by Evie Root. And then another one that I really love, which I've also mentioned, is Emily Wilson's translation as well. It's a bit controversial because she does kind of change some terms a bit, and people don't consider it to be a translation because of that and more of a retelling. I don't really have an opinion on that. I think regardless of whether it is a translation or not, I really love this, and I found that this was really readable, both of these. I've actually started reading the Odyssey again this year already. I am now reading the translation by Robert Fagles, who is a big name in the ancient classics world because he's written a lot of books about ancient Greece, as well as done some translations. So I might touch back on my thoughts about that when I'm finished. Another book that I bought a really long time ago, but just had sitting on my shelf for the longest time because I was intimidated to pick it up. And I think that's why I've really gotten into classics as I've gotten older, because yeah, when I was younger, I just felt like maybe they were really hard to read, but as an adult, I just love reading them so much. And I mean, they are more difficult sometimes than modern books because they are written so differently, and a lot of them are quite long, but I just love the way that they're written. But anyway, this is my sixth book, which is Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. I've read quite a few books now by Dostoevsky. I haven't read every single thing he's written. I am on that journey though, because when I really like an author, I will try to read all of their books. So I do have a few to go. I've read some of his other novels, such as The Brothers Karamazov, which I love. The Idiot, I'll probably never forget, especially the ending. Out of all the things I've read by him, Crime and Punishment is without a doubt my favorite book of his. And it is a book that I like to try to read every single year, especially in winter, because that is when this book is set. So this book, if you're not familiar with it, it's about a man named Raskolnikov. He is struggling a bit financially, and he ends up committing murder. The thing I love most about this book and all of Dostoevsky's books is the way that he was able to comprehend and describe the human psyche and also relationships between his different characters, because this book is obviously very focused on the concepts of crime and punishment. The book explores what Raskolnikov goes through after he commits this murder, what he's thinking and what he's feeling, and then his relationship with the other characters that he knows and how he deals with the consequences of his action. And it's just absolutely fascinating and so incredible how Dostoevsky gets into these themes and what he goes through. It's just a very deep book, like all of his writing is, but just really incredible and so interesting. I just really love this book because it makes me think, and every time I read it, I struggle with whether I like Raskolnikov as a character or not. I think that's why I also really like Dostoevsky, because his books really challenge you and he makes you think about so many different things. So this edition is just a Wordsworth edition, so just really basic. This translation is by Constance Garnett. She did a lot of Russian classic translations, and I've read a few of her translations in other authors, and I quite like her work. And then I've got a bit of a nicer edition, which is the Penguin clothbound edition. I didn't realize until recently that this coloring of this Penguin clothbound edition is a bit rare, which is kind of cool, because I've seen the same one. It's a darker tone. I think it's like a dark blue with red, but I discovered that this one is a little bit rare, which is cool, and I really like the coloring. But yeah, just a fascinating book and an incredible author. I'm looking forward to reading more of Dostoevsky's works that I haven't read yet. But if you are into his writing, let me know what your favorite story of his is. So those are the books that I like to try to read every year that are my favorites. Hopefully you enjoyed watching this and I didn't ramble on too much. If you are interested in seeing some more book recommendation videos, let me know. But thank you so much for watching, and of course thank you to my Patreon members. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.